Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshuru Nilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. This evening I would like to speak about Mayavad. Really? Why should we want to speak about Mayavad? The whole world is full of Mayavad. We want to speak against something we don't hear. We want to hear about Krishna. Well, let's clarify that. We want to speak against Mayavad, not trying to inspire everyone to be a Mayavadi. It's good to regularly discuss this. Srila Prabhupada largely defined his own mission by including in his pranam mantra the words Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarne, delivering the Western countries from impersonalism and voidism. Now, often in India, when we speak about Mayavad, people think that we're talking about materialism. But Mayavad is actually a philosophy which purports to be anti-materialistic. Or that's a simplification, but it's supposed to be a spiritual philosophy which is encapsulated in the Sanskrit but non-Shastric words of Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, that the Supreme is spiritual and this world is all false. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. And they take even Krishna, because he appears in this world, to be false. And the ultimate is impersonal. No form, no activities, no name, no personality. And that liberation means to... we've got it going on all sides. There's a sign, but no one cares. Yeah, the idea is that liberation is you become one with this impersonal oneness. You become one with the highest, that means you become God. So Srila Prabhupada was very much against this. It is, although it purports to be theistic, it's actually not even atheism, it's anti-theism. Atheism means to deny that there is any supreme. Anti-theism means to be against the supreme. In other words, if you say that I can also become God, that means you're challenging the position of God. Now, why should we discuss this? I mean, anyone who's been in Krishna consciousness for some time, they must have heard about this, they must have read it in Prabhupada's books. So what's the need to go on and on talking about it? We already understood this. Why don't we just talk about the beautiful, wonderful, glorious name, fame, glories, pastimes, and activities and associates of Sri Krishna? Well, one thing is we have to preach against all this Mayavad. And another thing is we have to exorcise the Mayavadi within us. You know this word, exorcise? It means to remove a ghost. From someone who's haunted by a ghost, and there's people who are exorcists, and they remove. I'm sure they have them in Russia too. They're everywhere. Ghosts are not... Ghosts are everywhere. You have the same word. Exorcise, more or less. Okay. Yeah, the example is given. It's this desire for impersonal liberation. It's just like a ghost or a witch within our heart. Rupa Goswami has given that analogy. He says, Bhukti mukti siddhi yavat pishachi hridi vartate tavat bhakti sukhasyatra katham abhyudayo bhavet. He states this in the form of a rhetorical question. He says that as long as the witches of desire for material enjoyment and for impersonal liberation. As long as both or either of these witches remain within the heart, how can one experience the bliss of bhakti? Many years ago, I think even before I was initiated, Mukunda Goswami, who was one of the first members of this movement, told me something about this. And this is actually recorded in much detail in a book by called The Hare Krishna Explosion by Hayagriva Das. This was the very early days of the Krishna conscious movement in 1966 in New York. There were a few people coming. They were hippies who were interested, you could say. And Mukunda Maharaj told me that Srila Prabhupada would often in the lectures speak about, he would speaking deprecatingly about Mayavadis. And the regular attendees, they thought that, well, Swamiji has some enemies back in India and he can't get it out of his system. He keeps on talking against them. But eventually they came to understand that we are the Mayavadis. Classic Mayavad of the style propagated by Shankaracharya, that is indigenous to India, but it has spread its poisonous genes all over the world. So we have in the West what is called New Age, which is a contemporary Western manifestation of the same old envy of Krishna in the name of Mayavad. Now, Srila Prabhupada pointed out that the traditional Mayavadi sannyasis in India, they're very, very strict in following rules and regulations. In following Vedic rules, they're much stricter than the Vaishnavas. They're very austere. But New Age is just the opposite. They don't follow any principles. But they just have this vague idea that if you take enough intoxication, you become God. Or that intoxication itself is God. And they have various formulae such as be here now, which is in the name of being something spiritual. It's actually just a call to gross sense gratification. You just put the curtain down, but there's someone listening outside. So it's as good as saying, we reject you. There's someone sitting outside. He just came and sat there, and then your response is to put the curtain down. This man came and sat down here 3 minutes ago, and then immediately put the curtain down. So you may not have noticed, but it might be misunderstood. It's liable to be misunderstood. We're talking against impersonalism here. Now, this New Ageism, it is characterized... Yeah, everyone please turn off their mobile. This New Age... it's very difficult to actually define what it is because it's all so vague. It's all indirect and about feelings and love and compassion and nothing very clear about it at all. One thing that when I first came in contact with Srila Prabhupada's teachings very much appealed to me, and I'm sure this is true of many people even up to the present day, everything very clear, straightforward, just no vagueness. Now, in spiritual life, there are certain things which are essential. Love, for instance, love, compassion, truth, kindness. But these are abstract terms. But Srila Prabhupada, he defined them in relationship to Krishna. If we just talk about love, cosmic love, love everyone, love everything, it's all vague and undefined. And what does it mean, anyone, just to love everyone, love everything? How does that work out? What do you do? Or to have compassion for all living beings? How can you do that? And people who talk about love and compassion without defining it in relationship, well, let's put it this first. Srila Prabhupada defined all these qualities in relationship to Krishna. Krishna is the supreme object of love. We can love everyone and love everything, seeing that everything and everyone is centered around and dependent upon Krishna. But if we talk about love without talking about Krishna, then it becomes very vague. We express love toward all living beings in relationship to Krishna by attempting to teach others about Krishna, bring others to Krishna consciousness. But if we talk about love for all living beings without reference to Krishna, then either it's just some vague concept and we don't do anything to help anyone in any way. We just sit and feel cosmic love. And often you find that these people who talk about love and compassion, they're actually some of the most low-minded, selfish people you could ever not wish to meet. Or they want to show their love and compassion, but they do so in a mundane way by, for instance, opening hospitals, helping the sick, helping the poor, it doesn't really help anyone in the ultimate sense because it's on the bodily platform. So we can talk about love, compassion, kindness, peace, and we can go on talking and talking and talking, but it has no meaning unless it's clearly connected to Krishna. Now we find that Srila Prabhupada, he always began his preaching in the same way that Krishna began his preaching to Arjuna, by explaining that we are not the body. Srila Prabhupada, generally in his preaching, he wouldn't start off speaking about God or about Krishna directly. Krishna. He would always speak Krishna Katha, but there are two kinds of Krishna Katha. One is Krishnasya Katha, that which is spoken directly by Krishna, that is Bhagavad Gita primarily. And there is Krishna Vishaya Katha, that's topics about Krishna, such as the descriptions of Krishna found in Srimad Bhagavatam. So to teach the teachings of Bhagavad Gita that we are not the body, that is also Krishna Katha. And factually speaking, we can't understand the nature of God or of Bhakti without understanding this basic teaching of the difference between matter and spirit. Savai pungsang paro dharmo yato bhaktir adhokshaje ahaitokya pratihataye atma suprasidati. The highest dharma or religion for all living beings is unmotivated and uninterrupted service to the transcendent Lord. That will fully satisfy the self. Now, the word used here for God is adhokshaja, which means who is beyond the ability to perceive or even conceive of by the mundane senses, mind and intelligence. So we can talk about God with Christians and Muslims and this and that, but we can't begin to understand God unless we understand what is the difference between spirit and matter. That matter is asat, achit, nirananda, temporary, full of ignorance. The nature of material manifestation is temporary, full of ignorance and lacking in bliss. And spiritual existence is Satchidananda, eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. So we are spiritual beings, we are not the body is matter, and the Supreme, who is Krishna, who is in English called God, and in your language called Bhog, I believe. And he is also Satchidanandamaya, eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. But the Mayavadis don't understand that yes, he is spiritual, we are spiritual, but he is infinite and we are infinitesimal. So this philosophy has to be understood very carefully. If we don't understand the difference between spirit and matter, then we will think that God is some great power who helps us to enjoy this material world. and that God helps us to defeat all our enemies within this world. People who don't follow the same religion as us, He beats them all up and chucks them into hell. And the idea of God, His highest gift is that He sends us to heaven where we enjoy ourselves forever. So without understanding the spiritual nature of God and of ourselves, we even if we conceive of the existence of God, we conceive of Him in practically material terms. And also, but if we conceive of ourselves and the Supreme Lord as being spiritual, we understand we're not the body, and we are spiritual and God is spiritual. That's advancement on a completely mundane outlook. It is an advancement on a totally mundane outlook. So the Mayavadis, they understand and accept that we are trapped in this material world, going from body to body to body. We're not the body. So gross materialists, they don't understand the difference between the body and spirit. But the Mayavadis, they don't understand the difference between spirit and spirit. They think that all spirits are ultimately one, which means that there's no one eternal supreme spirit. They may give great respect or superficial respect to Krishna and say that, well, he's a representation of God. It sounds respectful, but it's not. If we meet a representative of the president of Tatarstan, we'll offer him respect as a representative, but he's not the president of Tatarstan. In the actual president, we have to recognize that he's in a superior position to us. If we fail to recognize a person according to his proper level, that becomes insulting. When I'm in India, I sometimes give this example, because it's a common thing there that to some respectable person, you'll show respect to them by offering a flower garland. So if someone is appointed, okay, the President of India is coming, and when he comes, you give him a flower garland. So obviously when the President of India comes to a place, he doesn't come alone, he comes with many other people. So if there's some person who's supposed to get the garland, he's not sure, which one's the President? Who do I give it to? And say, that one, see, that one. So he walks up to the President with a big smile on his face, holding the flower garland, and picks up the flower garland and puts it on his bodyguard who's standing right next to him. So you should, if you're appointed to give a garland, you should know who the President of India is. He's a big enough person that you should know what he looks like. In this country, can't be expected, but in India, you should know. So if someone is going to talk about God and how we should respect God, we should know who God is. If we just talk very vaguely, God is love, God is light, yeah, well, who is he? Well, we don't know. Or we say, well, it's not really a person. That becomes offensive. Mayavadi Krishna aparadhi, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. Mayavadis are offenders to Krishna. Now, say someone did that. He put the garland on the bodyguard. It's a gaffe, which means a faux pas. You know what that means. It means a social impropriety. So anyway, if you do it once, you could be forgiven, could be overlooked. But if you go on doing it again and again and again, then it becomes a serious offense. So people who habitually speak about God, but they fail to recognize Krishna, or that there is a supreme person who is beyond this material world, then they become misleaders. But generally people, they like to hear this kind of talk that, well, it's all one and we're all God. Because if we accept that there is the supreme personality of Godhead, then we have to surrender to Him. We have to accept our subordinate position. So generally, if we tell people that you are God, it becomes much more popular than telling them that we're the servant of God. People like to be cheated. Srila Prabhupada several times noted that this impersonalism is the last snare of Maya. When we say the last snare of Maya, well, that refers to serious Mayavadis. They're very serious about getting liberated from the material world. They perform serious austerities, severe austerities. And they may become liberated, but not really. They're still in Maya. Ye nirvindaksha vimukta maninas tvayasta bhava davishuddha buddhaya aruhya kritrena parang padang tatam patantyadho nadrita yushmadangraya. In Srimad Bhagavatam it is stated that there are some people who they perform very severe austerities by which they can go to the spiritual atmosphere beyond this world. And it seems that they're liberated, but they're not fully liberated because they're not in fully pure consciousness, because they neglect to worship the lotus feet of Krishna. And therefore they have to fall down again. Because real liberation means muktir hitvanyata rupam swarupena vyavastitihi. To give up this present false body, this false form, and to be situated in our real position. And our real position is Jive Surup Hoy Krishna Nityadas, the eternal servant of Krishna. So this so-called New Age is not even the last snare of Maya. They never really moved anywhere out of Maya whatsoever. They don't follow any rules and regulations. They just presume that they're liberated. Sometimes we find that among putative devotees also. Putative means so-called. They say, well, you don't have to follow all these rules and regulations. You just chant Hare Krishna. That's all. Hare Nama, Hare Nama. There's only chanting the holy name. Hare Nama eva kalivalam. But the same Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who preached the Hare Nama eva kevalam verse, he also took time out of his chanting Hare Krishna to teach Rupa Goswami all the rules and regulations of devotional life that Rupa Goswami should write in books for the future devotees, both Rupa and Sanatana Goswami. So rules and regulations are important. And to discount the importance of rules and regulations, it's similar to the Mayavadi, the pseudo-Mayavadis. They're not even good enough to be called Mayavadis. Pseudo-Mayavadis and Sahajiyas, Prakrita Sahajiyas. And real spiritual life is based on real spiritual knowledge. That is the foundation. If we don't understand what is spiritual knowledge, then we'll be in ignorance. Spiritual life means, first of all, to understand we're not the body, we're eternal spirit soul. We're eternal servants of Krishna. And bhakti means to act for Krishna's pleasure. Without understanding this, then our so-called bhakti may remain completely material. And we think that instead of understanding that bhakti is meant for satisfying Krishna's transcendental senses, we think it's meant for satisfying our own mundane senses. So we think that good kirtan is one that is very musical and sung in a voice and in tunes that we like. So of course Krishna, he likes nice music. He also has his own taste in music. There's so many varieties of music, such as jazz and rock and roll and waltz music. But Krishna has the style that he likes. And Krishna wants to see if our heart is pure. Someone may sing in a very sweet voice and everyone will think, oh, what a wonderful kirtan. But if that person is singing for name and fame and money, then Krishna is not pleased and is not actually kirtan. And that may we think, oh, beautiful kirtan, but it cannot fully satisfy the heart because we're taking it, we're accepting it in a mundane way. So Srila Prabhupada, he often pointed out the defects of Mayavad, and we should continue to do so. It may sound very good. We talk about love and compassion and peace and spirituality, But unless it's on a very clear and solid understanding of the difference between spirit and matter, and unless that is clearly defined and in relationship to Krishna, it's all meaningless, it's all mundane. Unless we understand that love is meant for Krishna, then we will take love to mean something like the love between a man and a woman, which actually that binds us in material life. Pungsastriya mituni bhavametam tayoraho hridaya granthimahu ato griha kshetra sutapta vitair janasya mohoya mahammameti. The binding force in this material world is the attraction between man and woman, which binds one very tightly in this material world. From that attraction develops attraction towards my house, my country, my family, my children, my relatives, my money, my property, I, me, and mine. This is illusion. Now that doesn't mean that in Krishna consciousness one cannot have home, wife, children, and so on. But the consciousness is completely different from that of the bewildered materialist. But if we talk about love without making the distinction between so-called love of this material world and the pure love for Krishna, which is which is beyond all material attachment, then by talking of love, it may sound very spiritual, but we're actually just encouraging people in materialism. We may encourage people in selfless sacrifice. Just like in the Second World War, so many citizens of the USSR selflessly sacrificed their life for their country. And they were killed by Germans who also went on to selflessly sacrifice their life for their country. So on both sides they had very high ideals. But it was ultimately all useless, because the person who has such high sense of patriotism that he's willing to give his life, he gets born somewhere else anyway, in a completely different country, quite likely. So the beginning of spiritual life means to give spiritual knowledge, clear distinction between matter and spirit, beginning with understanding that we're not the body. It's very basic stuff, but material attachment is very strong and is very difficult to overcome. I was recently in America, and I heard devotees talking about, this Putin, he's such a bad man, he's invading Crimea, and we Americans, we have to do something about it. Yeah, devotees. Well, they didn't say all that, but they spoke disparagingly about Putin and all this kind of thing. And hearing this, I knew that almost certainly in Russia, there are devotees thinking that, Putin's doing great work for Russia. You can imagine there are two ant colonies, and they go to war against each other. And what do we care? The glorious ants are sacrificing their life. So what? In the great pantomime of time, it's all meaningless. They may say that actually Srila Prabhupada confirmed what one astrologer had said, that one previous Prime Minister of India had become a dog in Sweden. So someone may come to find out that, you be careful with that dog. That dog was previously the Prime Minister of India. Don't mistreat it. Oh, really? Anyway, in the West, people treat their dogs like that. Even they treat their dogs more than the Prime Minister of India. Any dog. I think it's more, maybe not so much in Russia, but it's definitely if in America and England, if you read in the newspaper that 20 Palestinians were killed, okay, give me another cup of coffee. But if you hear that someone beat a dog, they'll become very upset. So as Srila Prabhupada often pointed out, they love dog, not God. And sometimes some people may talk very high things about spirituality, cosmic love. But these impersonalists, what actually happens is there's no bliss in just imagining yourself to be God. And So they manifest their cosmic love by performing mundane welfare work. They say this world is false, but we have to open hospitals and feed the poor so that they can be happily in Maya, or whatever. I don't know what their philosophy is. There's no bliss in this impersonalism. They become frustrated because the nature of the soul is to be active. Nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu tishtat karma krit. As our nature as spiritual living being is to be active always, at every moment. So if we simply try to become inactive, then after some time we just get frustrated. Aham brahmasmi, I am supreme. Pragyanam brahma, the highest intelligence is to understand that I am supreme. Tattvam asi, you are that. Oh. Well, there's no Krishna, there's no bliss. So they want to demonstrate their superiority, but not in the way of some despot who crushes people. But they want to demonstrate their superior cosmic love by opening hospitals and helping the poor and all this kind of thing. But it's just on the bodily platform. They come down from their high, vague talk to just something mundane. And after some time they become again frustrated with all that altruism. And then again, aham brahmasmi. Or once they become involved with all this material things, like opening hospitals and schools, which means you have to collect money and deal with materialistic people in a material way. And they themselves just become absolutely materialistic. When I first read in Srila Prabhupada's books that ultimately the Mayavadis and the Shunyavadis, the voidists, they're all gross materialists. I was surprised to read that. But actually their philosophies lead to gross materialism. Some of the most materialistic people in the world, they subscribe to Buddhism. In countries that are Buddhist, people tend to be very materialistic. They may not, when we say materialistic, we often think of people that are just very greedy for money. But they may not be very greedy for money, but they're very much interested in sense gratification. That you don't need lots of money to have lots of sense gratification. Especially in a country with a warm climate, you don't have to work much and you can enjoy women and wine and all these things and be happy. So because the ultimate aim is just to become one, or to become nothing, either become one or become zero, and neither is very attractive. The idea of just merging into some undefined light, it's not something very attractive. Or the idea of just becoming zero, that's also not very attractive. And the process to attain that kind of liberation, it's also not at all attractive. Just becoming very austere. So what happens actually is that in the name of being Buddhist or in the name of being spiritual, they just become gross materialists. It encourages gross materialism under the garb or the disguise of supposed spiritualism. They may show even themselves to be very spiritual. They may, Mayavadis in India, they may do also bhajans, they may have deity worship, and they talk about Bhakti, but they're actually cheating people by this. They attract people by a show of spiritualism, by showing temple or by doing altruistic works, helping the poor, and they say this is all very spiritual. So they pull people in like this, just like on fishing, catch the fish and then you pull it in. And then they just preach all this Mayavad. Or they may not even speak directly Mayavad. But they don't speak about Krishna or the clear understanding of Krishna consciousness. Everything all very vague and indirect. They may say, well, this is You see, this is spiritual culture with astrology and psychology and Ayurveda. What about Krishna? They just left Krishna out. Meditation, yoga. So they got everything except the real thing, which is Krishna. So in this way they're cheating people. We should be very careful of these Mayavadis. And we should preach as Srila Prabhupada preached, so that people can distinguish between what is real and what is only a semblance of reality. Srila Prabhupada made it very clear, everything very clear. What is the path of spiritual life? Rasoham apsu kaunteya. If we don't want to accept Krishna as he is, then we should at least begin to see Krishna, for instance, by seeing him as the taste of water. Practical demonstration is about to come. So, it's accepted that not everyone's willing to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead immediately. So we can start to see Krishna in the material. Rasoham apsu kaunteya. Krishna is the taste in water. Hare Krishna. Prabhasmi sashi surya yoho. Krishna is the light of the sun and the moon. Pranava sarva vedeshu. That pranav, that om, which the Mayavadis love, that is Krishna. Shabda ke, the sound in ether, that is Krishna. And Paurusham Nrishu, the ability in man, that is Krishna. So, yeah, everything is spiritual, that's true. Mayavadis like to say everything is spiritual. But everything is spiritual because of its relationship with Krishna. Without Krishna, if we attempt to call something spiritual, it is simply cheating. And that is what the Mayavadis are doing. Hare Krishna. Mayavadis, they may chant Hare Krishna, or in different, if not the Hare Krishna mantra, then some other Govinda, 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 Gopala, Gopala, Gopala. This is the way some Sai Baba followers they chant. But even though they're chanting the names of Krishna, they won't be purified by that. Bahujanma kare jadi shravan kirtan tapota napai Krishna pade premadan. Those who are offensive in their chanting, they may chant for many lifetimes, but they don't get love of Krishna. We should not keep everything clear, straightforward, go clearly on the path back to God. Don't mix up with Mayavadis. If we hear from Mayavadis, then it's poison. We are doomed. Avaishnava mokhod girnam putam harikatamritam shravana naiva kartavyam. What is that? Shravana naiva kartavya sarpochishta yatha dugdham. It's just like milk touched by the poisonous lips of a serpent. Sarpochishtam yatha payam. It may look like milk, it may taste like milk, but it doesn't have the nourishing effect of milk. Just the opposite. Because there's it's all milk, but there's an admixture, tiny admixture of the poison, of the serpent's poison. So in the same way, if we hear talks of Krishna from people who are infected by the Mayavad of not wanting to acknowledge or present Krishna, then we are poisoned. So poisonous. Therefore Srila Prabhupada, he warned us repeatedly against this Mayavad. Get it out of our system. People, they do detoxification of their body by taking very pure foods or taking no food. And they stop taking all poisonous foods, such as foods which are grown with chemicals, artificial chemicals. So we have to do detoxification of our consciousness by getting out all that is poisonous. Hare Krishna. So I guess we can have Arati in a few minutes, huh? Okay. For a few minutes I can take them. Yeah. Time for it.
So the first one, I will read the first one. So what is the border between Vaishnava Aparada and correcting mistakes? We don't want to criticize and to point out the defects when we have these defects ourselves, but sometimes devotees obviously speak something which is contradictory to Srila Prabhupada's books, which contradicts Srila Prabhupada's books, and they may also do not follow the rules of purity. We want to point out this to these devotees, but we are afraid that they'll get offended. Also, we understand that we ourselves are not so strict, and thus we keep silent. What to do?
Read it in Russian. Actually, no one in this movement should speak against Prabhupada's books. If anyone does so, that should be pointed out. If someone is clearly speaking something which is against the teachings that Srila Prabhupada has given us, and that's pointed out, and they become upset, then they're a rascal. You may say, the Vaishnava Parad, this is something... I mean, when Prabhupada was present, he didn't talk all the time, day and night, in his dreams about Vaishnava Parad. We should avoid Vaishnava Parad, it's very serious. But it's also very serious to speak wrong philosophy. It's also very wrong to take a position of being a spiritual leader and tell everyone don't make a Vaishnava Parad when you mislead them. So this, so much emphasis, don't make Vaishnava Parad, it suggests to me that some people, they're almost knowingly misleading others and they want to scare them into not pointing it out. There is also the major consideration of, as we find in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, distinguishing reality from truth from non-truth for the benefit of all. But once this Mayavad enters of, well, you see, nothing's very clear, and you have to consider this and that, and then nothing becomes absolute, and then we don't know where we're just lost in the sea of Mayavad. Srila Prabhupada made everything clear. This is right, this is wrong. But vagueness, well, you see, Prabhupada said this, but. Have you ever heard anyone say that? Prabhupada said this, but. As soon as the word but comes, you know that they're going to say something to nullify what Srila Prabhupada, or attempt to nullify what Prabhupada said. Yes, we respect everything Prabhupada said, but, you know, but. That was 40 years ago, and now things have changed. It's the same material world, the same birth, death, old age, and disease. Same Mayavad, the same illusion, imperfect senses, cheating propensity, and tendency to make mistakes. So, when everything becomes very vague, then it's easy to mislead others. So we should seek to have a clear understanding of what is Krishna consciousness. And we should understand that Srila Prabhupada is the empowered representative of Krishna who came to clear away all this vagueness and make everything very clear and straightforward. We're all complete. If at all we are going to make any advancement in Krishna consciousness, we are all completely dependent on Prabhupada's mercy. And Prabhupada, he was very practical. His mercy came in the form of his instruction. So our real success is to clearly understand Prabhupada's instructions and clearly follow them. Then our path to Krishna will be very clear. And even if we have thousands of followers and people all like us, unless we satisfy Prabhupada, it's all useless. Of course, we wonder there are thousands of people who appreciate Krishna consciousness. Yeah, we want that. But just like yesterday I gave that example, we shouldn't put the cart before the horse. If we think that our main goal is that people should like us, but we forget the Krishna consciousness part, then it's all useless. There are big Mayavadi gurus in India who are world famous. They talk what people like to hear, all vague stuff about love and compassion and peace and all this kind of stuff. So many people appreciate it. It's all useless because there's no Krishna. So if we think that Well, we want thousands and thousands of people to come to Krishna consciousness. That's a very good way of thinking. But the problem is that when we go to preach Krishna consciousness, we don't get thousands and thousands of people coming. So we look at the Mayavadis and see they have so many people coming. Said we should be like them. No, we should not be like them. Even if only one person comes, or even if no one comes, we have to present the absolute truth as it is. If we bring thousands and thousands of people and say, well, after we'll give Krishna consciousness, but it never happens, because we're going on and on making programs in which we're being very vague, and we never stop being vague. If we start to act and talk like Mayavadis, then we ourselves become Mayavadis. What's that bird? It looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it must be a duck. What is that bird? D-U-C-K. It looks like a duck, it swims like a duck, it quacks like a duck. Must be a duck. So if we're supposed to be devotees, but we present ourselves as Mayavadis, we talk like Mayavadis, what happened? That's what will happen. Then even in our own internal classes, we start talking like that also. Who here regularly listens to Srila Prabhupada's classes? Yeah. How many times did you hear Prabhupada say Mayavadis are rascals? All the time. How many times do you hear it in temple classes? Never. So, that means the parampara, very, very rarely maybe. That means that the parampara is lost. Is it or not? Am I a Vaishnava Aparadi by saying this, or is it just a scientific analysis of what's actually happening? Well, I'm not supposed to say controversial things.